Hello and welcome in to the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. We've got a little bit of a preview podcast coming your way today. We are joined by Cody Nagel, who covers Oklahoma State for the 24/7 Sports Network. Cody, we're in crossover season. Basketball is set to start. KU has an exhibition on Thursday. They open on Monday. Busy times, but how are things going for you this week?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, busy, a lot of stuff going on, but obviously football, takes priority. So, Oklahoma State basketball gets started too with their exhibition on Thursday, but yeah, football season's still priority down here.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it kind of is here too. I'm thinking about the plan for the week, and it's like, exhibition. We'll probably do more football stuff than maybe you would in past years, and I think that's a result of fan interest and the team being good. And I want to start here. I like to start these preview podcasts with kind of a vibe check, and I'm sure things are a little difficult in Oklahoma State territory after a blowout loss to Kansas State on the road. But I guess around the facility with the fan base, what's just the feeling like coming off of a loss like that?
Yeah, I think they're frustrated just because it kind of felt like maybe not a blowout loss was coming, but you could tell a loss like this was going to come eventually just because of the injuries that Oklahoma State's been dealing with. Their schemes and game plans were maybe questionable at best. They snuck by Texas. Even the Texas Tech game to start October was, they were down and for most of that game too, and had to come back in the second half. And fans were questioning, kind of the coaching approach and stuff like that. So I think fans are frustrated, just kind of hoping that they can find a way to, get back to Arlington and hope that Kansas State loses a couple. And for Oklahoma State, you got to win out. As far as the players, we talked to a few of them yesterday after practice. You can tell they're still frustrated with what happened. I guess disappointed is probably the better word to use. They just felt like they got their absolute or butts just absolutely kicked. Brock Martin said you didn't think, basically said the team didn't get off the bus. The attitude pregame was just off. So yeah, I think they're frustrated with that part, but they're also ready to just move on and know that they've got four really important games here to end out the final month of the season. So yeah, it's frustration, disappointment. I think
Yeah.
some confusion's also built in there on what we can get into this too, but the changes that Oklahoma State made during practice last week, leading up to that Kansas State game. Mike Gundy said he changed some things up that he hasn't really done in the past, and obviously it didn't work, and he's not going to do that again. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe some frustration built in there with why are we changing things up and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a lot of wide range of emotions right now.
Yeah, and so you kind of led me to my next question. Let's hit on some of the injury stuff because I think if what I've read is correct, that's what led Mike Gundy to change kind of the practice schedule that they had going into the K-State game. Obviously, Oklahoma State is super banged up. KU fans know plenty about that, right? Going into the bye week after that Baylor game, you could look up and down the roster and really, you're looking at double-digit guys on the two deep dealing with injuries. And of course, KU had their bye week and they're coming off of that bye week for this game. Oklahoma State, their bye week was all the way back in September. They've been playing straight Big 12 games. They play at Baylor, at home to Texas Tech, at TCU, home to Texas, at K-State, all without a bye week within there. So let's start here, Cody. Going into this game, like how banged up is this Oklahoma State team? Because everything that I've been able to read so far points to them being even more banged up than I think Kansas even was after that Baylor game.
Yeah, I think last week or the last 2 weeks it was really bad. They were without six starters before they even played Texas, and then they had a few guys go down with injuries in that game. Last week they had, I think, three or four guys that would be starters out. A couple wide receivers. Their starting running back didn't play, and then their starting right guard, who's probably their best offensive lineman, he didn't play as well. And then you had a couple other guys that they did play, including Spencer Sanders. I mean, he's been dealing with a shoulder injury for the past 3-4 weeks now. They had a few guys like him that, toughed it out and played, but you could tell they just weren't at 100%. Jason Taylor, their starting safety back there, most experienced defensive back. You could tell he just wasn't really 100%, wasn't full speed after he kind of tweaked his knee, I think, at the end of that Texas game on the interception he actually made. And Ollie Gordon, one of their backup running backs, I guess was dealing with a little, flu bug or something like that during practice last week. So, he wasn't fully ready to go. So yeah, they're just kind of dealing with a lot of injuries, just kind of at all positions, honestly. So it's kind of a mess right now. And like you said, they could really use a bye week right now, but unfortunately, that already happened, and you just kind of got to crawl to the finish line at this point.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that there's a switch in the practice and the way that they did it. I guess talk to us about what kind of they did, and are they doing that again this week? Because I've got kind of three questions in one here. So I guess walk us through kind of what they changed. Obviously, it didn't help against Kansas State. Did it help the players in terms of getting guys fresher for this week? Like, walk us through kind of the last kind of 10 days or so and how everything's kind of unfolded for Oklahoma State.
Yeah, the post game after the K-State loss, Gundy mentioned he had changed some things up, and I kind of pressed him. I was like, "What were those things that you changed exactly?" Because he had mentioned it was kind of his concern was the injuries and how banged up guys were, and he didn't want to have a physical practice really, and add to the injury list or anything like that. So I kind of pressed him on what things he changed. He didn't want to get into any details, but just kind of reading between the lines, I'm assuming it just was a pretty light practice schedule throughout the week. Maybe not a bunch of one-on-ones or anything like that, like first team versus first team. I think it was mostly, guys just going up against the scout team, and probably a lot of walkthrough type stuff. And I don't think they really were physical throughout the week. And then I think when you get to K-State and you've gone basically on, that was kind of like their bye week. They kind of just took practice lightly. And then you get up to K-State and you got to go play a game. Having a full week of light practices, you're probably going to get your butt kicked like they did. So, we're not 100% sure on what they changed exactly or what adjustments they made, but my assumption is they just kind of took it light throughout the week. And Gundy said this Monday that they're not going to do that again. They're going back to the way they practiced before, and if guys are banged up, they're again, they're just going to have to toughen it out and try and get through this final week of this or final month of the season.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the laundry list of guys that are out, and this will be the last injury question. Then we'll get on to some of the other stuff. You mentioned the guys that are out. I guess, are they going to get many of them back, do you think? Like, I guess, what crucial players do you feel like Oklahoma State might be without, or who might they get back this week?
I think there's a chance they get Dominic Richardson, their starting running back, and maybe Hunter Woodard back. That's their starting right guard. And like I said, one of their best offensive linemen. I think there's a chance they get those guys back. And, they've been really struggling with the run game. And obviously having those two guys out last week didn't help at all. So maybe if they can get those guys back in there, that'll, try and open some things up there. But Braden Johnson, wide receiver, he's kind of been in and out throughout the year. Jaden Bray, who's came into the season with high expectations that, people thought he might be the leading receiver. He's been dealing with I believe it's like a hand injury or something like that. He played one game and then re-injured it. So he's probably done for the year. My guess is they just redshirt him. Maybe towards the end of the year, he's only played the one game. Maybe he comes back in for those final 3 games or so. That way they can still use his red shirt. So I don't think he'll play this weekend, but other than that, I think pretty much everyone else should be able to go. But again, who knows, if they re-injure something during practice this week, we'll find out Saturday morning before kickoff.
For sure. And so I want to dive into the offensive side of things. We'll get to Sanders and Gunnar Gundy in a second, but with the running game, I thought last year you looked at Oklahoma State and the running game was, I thought, one of maybe their strengths. This year, it's not been that. You look at the total kind of average yards per game, right? They're averaging 141 rushing yards per game, which ranks number 8 in the Big 12, and they're averaging 3.7 yards per carry, which is number 9 in the Big 12. for a team that I feel like every year you look at and say their offense is good and they're able to run the ball pretty well, what exactly do you think has led to all of a sudden really just not being able to run the ball that well this year?
I think it's a couple different things. Last year they had Jalen Warren, who really didn't do a whole lot the first 2 or 3 games. Then kind of had his breakout game against Boise State, and they realized, okay, we gotta use this guy more. And obviously, he was really talented. Now he's kind of the backup running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL. And if you watch some of his highlights that he's having in Pittsburgh right now, you'll see that he was able to create a lot of holes or create space for himself. So Oklahoma State's missing that now. They don't really have that, shifty. He had a good balance of shiftiness, but also just physicality that he could break through tackles.
Hmm.
Dominic Richardson right now is kind of Oklahoma State's bruiser back that can, knock over defenders, but doesn't have that shiftiness to really, create his own space, find his own holes, stuff like that. That's kind of more what Jaden Nixon does. But he's, a smaller back, doesn't have a whole lot of size. So they don't have that, combination back that really, that they can, use in all aspects or anything like that. So I think that's a factor. And then the offensive line's just, again, been beat up throughout the season. They're, not really shifting guys around, but kind of plugging guys in as, somebody goes out. So there hasn't been a whole lot of, continuity up there, which that's been an issue they've dealt with for what feels like the last 3 or 4 years. I just have constant injury issues up there, and just haven't had a solid starting five for, the past 3 or 4 seasons. So I think it's a combination of those two things. And, it's kind of, at least, from a fan's perspective, I think it's frustrating because, we continue to ask Gundy and offensive coordinator Casey Dunn, like, what things can you do to change that? Can you change up your schemes, and how you run the ball? And, they don't really give us a whole lot. And Gundy always says, well, he's not going to change stuff up. He doesn't think it's, productive to, kind of change up your offense throughout, midway through the season. So there's kind of some frustration there, I think, from fans on, there's this known issue that the run game just isn't working. And it doesn't seem like they have a whole lot of answers to fix it.
Yeah, and yet you look at the point totals for a lot of these games, and they're able to put up a good amount of points, right? You look at kind of 30 plus in Big 12 play, which, considering how good some of these defenses are, is pretty impressive. Has that been more on Spencer Sanders being great, and how has the injury impacted him kind of here in recent weeks?
Yeah, so the first month of the season, he was really good. It looked like he was going to be on track for his best season of his career without a doubt. And then against Texas Tech late, and I think it was fourth quarter or something, he went to run in at the goal line and kind of got hit in the shoulder area, which it was his throwing shoulder too. And since then he just hasn't been 100%. You can tell, on some of his deep throws, he's leaving them a lot, or leaving them short a lot. So, anything past like 20 yards, basically, there's a good chance it's probably going to end up short. So you can tell he's off on those throws.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he hasn't been 100% since then. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he actually goes on Saturday.
Yeah, and Gunnar Gundy, what exactly is he like? We talked to defensive coordinator Brian Borland on Tuesday, and he was kind of like, Gunner's a good quarterback. And of course, right, he's not going to come out and say, no, the guy stinks and he shouldn't be, like, he's not going to say that. But he basically said, yeah, he had offers coming out of high school, is a good player. But I guess what exactly is kind of his game from what you've been able to see in games, because he's played, but also from what you just heard around the program?
Yeah, he's actually a little bit more mobile than you'd think. Obviously, not like Spencer Sanders. He's not going to just take off and run 15 times a game or anything like that. But last week against Kansas State, he played 2 drives. That second or last one, he had a 22-yard scramble and run. So he's got the ability to take off and run, but it's not really his strength. Throwing wise, I think it's honestly it's hard to judge because anytime he has played, it's been late in the game,
Mm.
kind of no pressure situation. So, the defenses are like last week, the defense is playing back. They're just trying not to let up any big plays. So, he completes, a couple passes, short passes and stuff like that. But, anything deep, we just haven't seen enough of him to kind of grade, how he is as a passer. But I mean, obviously in high school, he was playing in, I believe it's the second highest, level or whatever here in Oklahoma. He was one of the better quarterbacks in the state. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, he's a talented quarterback. He obviously knows the offense inside and out, being around the program for, his whole childhood, being around Casey Dunn too as a kid. He's been in, he's been in the program and inside the facilities for his entire life. He knows how things operate. So, I don't think that part's an issue or anything like that. And Gundy said on Monday that the playbook doesn't necessarily change, whether it's Spencer Sanders or Gunnar Gundy at quarterback. But I don't think you have that. Sanders has the ability to just make plays, create plays. I think Gunnar has a little bit of that, but not so much, as a threat with his legs like Spencer would be.
For sure. So let's switch to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Jim Knowles is now at Ohio State. He was the defensive coordinator for Oklahoma State, was really good. And now Derek Mason is Oklahoma State's defensive coordinator. Are they doing a lot different from past years? Because when I think of Oklahoma State under Jim Knowles, it's, man coverage on the outside, good linebackers, really tough physical defensive line. Have they changed a bunch now that Mason is taking over, or is it kind of still the same ideology as they had before?
Yeah, the schemes are all pretty much the same. That defense that Jim Knowles had, or that Oklahoma State had last year, that was kind of a creation of what Jim put in, and also with input from the assistants that are all still here.
Mm.
So it wasn't like Jim Knowles left and took the whole defense with him. The schemes are all the same. This still the three linemen, three linemen, two linebackers, five defensive backs, or excuse me, four defensive linemen. Can't get my math right here, but yeah, four defensive linemen, two linebackers, and the five DBs.
Mm-hmm.
But everything's pretty much the same. Obviously Derek Mason comes in with his knowledge and adds his wrinkles and some approaches and stuff like that. But it hasn't been a whole lot different from last year. But numbers wise, it doesn't look great on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Which I would say before last week, I thought it was a lot better than what it looked like on paper. Obviously, you put up or give up 48 points and, all the yards that they did to Kansas State, it doesn't look great at all.
Mm-hmm.
Either way you look at it. But, the Texas game, they held on Longhorns to a field goal in the second half. And then the Texas Tech game, I believe they held them to just a touchdown in the second half. So, it was kind of, they were showing signs of improvement. You were just kind of waiting for them to put this, full good game together. But obviously injuries kind of hurt with that too.
Yeah.
And then you go to K-State and you give up 48 points. That kind of took my, kind of what I thought of the defense, kind of threw that out the window. But, I still think they're decent. Obviously they've got a ton of talent at the edge rushers, which they haven't been as productive as far as getting sacks this year. They still produce a lot of tackles for loss. So, they're pushing opponents back and, forcing some third and longs, and then they're really good on third downs. So, if they can, continue to do that and push Kansas back and, which is a really good third down offense. If they can push Kansas back into some third and longs, I think you'll see just kind of where the strengths of this defense actually are.
Yeah, and you kind of brought me to my next question, because I think you look at KU and early in the season, really good first and second down team, and that set up a lot of those third and shorts where super easy to convert, right? You've got a full playbook there you can work with. And really kind of the last 3-4 weeks, it's been a lot of first and second down, a run for 1 yard, a pass for 4 yards, and you're at 3rd and 5, or, an incompletion on first down, a 2-yard run on second down is 3rd and long. Like the 3rd and longs have been much more abundant recently than they were before. which if what you're saying, I think that'd be an issue for KU if they're getting a lot of third and longs here. But when you look at the Oklahoma State defense, Cody, like where exactly do you feel like maybe the soft spots are, or where you feel like the spots where you're kind of got some concerns heading into this game?
Yeah, the big concern all year has been the secondary, just because of the guys they lost, just the inexperience that's back there. It's not much for youth. I think it's more inexperience. There's two starting cornerbacks are juniors. They've played significant snaps their first 2 years, so but they just hadn't had a whole lot of starts because of the guys that were in front of them. You think of um, uh, blanking on his name, Jarek Bernard Converse. He's now at LSU as a transfer.
Hmm.
Christian Holmes is in the NFL with the Washington Commanders. Um, as far as their safeties, you had Colby Harvell-Peel. Tanner McAllister is a transfer at Ohio State with Jim Knowles. So they had a lot of experienced guys that left, and then they were kind of forced to plug the holes and put guys in and move guys up that you know that had game experience but hadn't had the significant amount of snaps that those guys that left that they had.
Mm-hmm.
So the secondary was a question coming into this season, and that's kind of been the sore spot. They give up a lot of big plays in the pass game. Excuse me. But another area is the run defense. That it wasn't terrible to start the season, but as they've gotten into Big 12 play, when you have these offenses that are able to run the ball, they've given up a lot of yards on the ground. Last week, Deuce Vaughn basically just it seemed like he took every carry he had, 10 plus yards, which I think he actually averaged close to 9 yards a carry.
Hmm.
So their run defense has been pretty weak the past few weeks. So yeah, those are the two areas that are most concerning.
Definitely. And so I want to get one more question for you, and then we can split and let you go. When you think about this game, what do you feel like is the biggest key for Oklahoma State, either to win, to get back on track? Like, what are you going to be kind of looking for in this game that makes you feel like, okay, if Oklahoma State does this, they have a really, really good chance at winning this game?
I mean, I don't know how much of a key it is. I think it's more if Spencer Sanders plays or not.
Mm.
I think if he plays, I think that gives, even if he's 50%, I think that gives Oklahoma State a decent shot at winning. But if he doesn't play, I would be really concerned for Oklahoma State's chances of winning up there. Just because of, Gunnar Gundy hasn't made a start in his career. The only snaps he's played are late game situations when there's really not a whole lot of pressure. You go into, especially to have your first start in a road environment where, normally past years, Kansas hasn't been a, great home field advantage for them or anything like that. But, like you mentioned at the start of the show, there's a lot of interest in football up there now. They've had a few
Mm-hmm.
sellouts in a row. I'm not sure. I guess maybe you can answer this if this weekend is a sellout or anything like that. But, maybe by Saturday it'll get to that point.
Yeah,
But, you go into your first college start as a, sellout crowd and hostile crowd. And, I'd be concerned about that. But,
mm-hmm.
if Spencer's able to go, I would like Oklahoma State's chances. But if he's not, that's a big concern. And obviously raises a lot of question marks on how the game will go for Oklahoma State.
For sure. I totally agree. I think for me, the starting quarterbacks is kind of where the game hinges. And I think the Vegas line is moving around as a result. It opens at kind of 3.5, and it's now kind of down in the 1 range, depending on where you want to look. So it should be an interesting game. Very intrigued by it. Cody, thanks a bunch for coming on. Where can KU fans or just football fans in general find your stuff?
Yeah, so on GoPokes247.com, that's all the Oklahoma State coverage. And then on Twitter, you can follow me at Cody Nagel 27 or 24/7. So yeah, hit me up there.
Perfect. Love it. Thanks a bunch for coming on, Cody.
Yeah, you bet.